Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military of a Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 1st of November of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Moscow, about Russia, about Moscow, and about the relations with North Korea. Today we have report that a very important person arrived in Russia. We are talking about the head of the North Korean Foreign Ministry. Her name is Chon Song-hee, and she stated a lot of different and very important things. First of all, the DPRK has no doubts that the Russian army will achieve victory. Pyongyang will firmly stand next to its Russian comrades. The head of the DPRK Foreign Ministry, who is on a visit to Moscow, announced Kim Jong-un's instructions to help the Russian army from the very beginning of the special military operation. From one perspective, these are just regular words, but due to the situation on the ground and due to different statements that were made by Zelensky, by the Western countries, we can see that this is something like official announcement of the entering of the DPRK, of official involvement of the DPRK in the special military operation on the Russian side. We have a lot of statements from Zelensky itself, and according to things that he was talking about, obviously he's afraid of the things, he's afraid of everything that is happening right now, and he's afraid of DPRK because nobody from the Western countries, including Zelensky, NATO countries, Western countries, didn't expect that the Russians will be able to, not to force, will be able to negotiate with DPRK and to give something them in exchange on the participation of the special military operation. For example, today we also had a lot of statements from Washington, from the capital of the United States of America, and today there was a meeting between the representatives of the power of the United States of America and South Korean representatives, and of course they were talking about the North Korean troopers, about the things that North Korea and North Korean troopers are going to get a very, very important thing in the special military operation if their units are involved in this operation. Everybody understand that within the next 6 months the North Korean troops will be able to get real combat experience. 12,000 North Koreans will be able to get real combat experience, and currently this is the most valuable asset of the special military operation, and this is the thing that the countries around North Korea are afraid of most of all, like Southern Korea, like Japan, and so on. And that when I was watching this photo, when I was reading this article, the statements that were made by Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, I came to a conclusion that very likely, I'm not saying that 100%, but very likely that we're not going to see these people within the next 3 months, because on the 5th of November, as you know, there are president elections in the United States of America, and if Trump wins, most likely these two persons like Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin would be dismissed, and this will everybody understand this. And this is very interesting, that the special military operation, the war in Ukraine, started with one camp, with one union of people from United Kingdom, from France, from Germany, from United States of America, and now we are coming to 2025, and obviously in the beginning of the next year and during the next year we're gonna see completely different faces, completely different people who has nothing, who has no let's say relations with the special military operation and with the beginning of this war in Ukraine. And this is the most difficult and the most dangerous situation for Zelensky. But for example, today Zelensky also made a statement about Donald Trump victory, possible victory. He said that Trump will not be able to stop the war by forcing Ukraine to give up its territories. That was stated by Zelensky. If Trump, in case of victory, wants to end the war by forcing Ukraine to give up its territories, then he will not succeed, Zelensky told the South Korean TV channels. And now, according to information we have, due to let's say appearance movements of the North Korean troopers on the border with Ukraine, not on the territory of Ukraine, but in the Kursk region, there are very high chances that South Korea will lift any restrictions to send and support Ukraine with weapon. We know that South Korea is the place where NATO countries produce a lot of weapon for this organization, and now a lot of things most likely is going to go exactly on the territory of this state. Okay, now let's talk about the situation on the ground, and first we're going to discuss the South Donetsk direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. Today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation gave us lots of statements, gave us another report where they reported that as a result of clashes the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Shakhtarskaya. So this small settlement was captured by the Russians, and based on this report of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. As for the geolocations, we have just one video from the central part, and in this video we can see the Russian soldier that was raising a flag above the building in the central part of the settlement. So it's not the western part of the settlement, it's just the central one, but most likely it's still unsecure to walk and to stay in the western part due to work of Ukrainian snipers or FPV drones. Anyway, the map was adjusted. Now let's talk about Novoukrainka, because according to the same Ministry of Defense report, the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to secure the village of Novoukrainka completely. So two villages on the South Donetsk direction were captured by the Russians, according to official statement of the Ministry of Defense. As for other updates or other reports, we have a lot of changes on the map. For example, pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly further in the northern direction from the village of Novoukrainka. The Russians captured a significant number of trenches, fortifications, tree lines, and the most important, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians took under control this company stronghold that is located between the villages of Novoukrainka and Bogoyavlenka. Obviously, this is a significant progress, and we see that the Russians are moving further towards the road 0510, this one. And currently, furthermore, some sources have already stated, mainly pro-Russian sources, that currently there are very heavy clashes for the village of Maximovka. This is the last village in the South Donetsk direction. After this village, we're going to see the river of Sukhiye Yavli and the significant number of small towns and small villages along this river. Now let's discuss in details once again. Let's take a look on the situation, on how the situation was developing since the 24th of October. So this is the beginning of Russian Greater South Donetsk offensive operation, and every single day the Russian sources, the neutral mappers, pro-Ukrainian mappers were adjusting the map in Russian favor, because the Russians were advancing, and by the beginning of the 1st of November, four villages were captured by the Russians. There are statements about clashes for the fifth village, and the sources are saying that most likely the Russians have already captured also the village of Trudova. At least that was stated by pro-Russian resources. When summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that very likely during the next few days the Russians will be able to establish complete control over the territory along this red line, and this is going to be the next front line, the next line of combat contact. But there is one important thing, that as for the village of Trudova, we understand that the Russians currently are heading towards the next company strongholds between the village of Uspenovka and the village of Konstantinopolska. If the Russians are able to take this stronghold under control and to force the Ukrainians to fall back, then this territory would be cut in two, and basically the Ukrainian soldiers that are currently located on the line between the village of Uspenovka, Gannovka, Veselogay, Yelizavetovka, Ilinka, Antonovka, we're talking about this, several villages would be cut from supply and most likely would appear in the operational encirclement. So this is the vital and decisive strategical point for Ukrainian forces, and once again, according to different mappers, the Russians reached the outskirts of this company stronghold. So very interesting situation, and we see that Ukrainians still haven't managed to stabilize the situation. Now let's talk about the northern direction, where we are going to talk about the area of responsibilities of the group of forces center. As you can see, we have lots of icons. Most of them are the icons with flags, which confirms additional progress of the armed force of Russian Federation. First, let's compare the map between the 31st and the 1st of November. According to information we have, the Russians just reached the outskirts of Novoselidovka, Kremenная Balka. There were still clashes on the territory of the village of Kurakhove. And by the end of the 1st of November, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly to secure the village of Kurakhove, Vovchenko completely. The Russians managed to take under control the stronghold. The Russians managed to capture 50% of Novoselidovka, and the Russians managed to secure the village of Kremenная Balka completely. Some reliable pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians during the 1st of November managed to move even further along this line and to take under control two more villages, and we're talking about the settlements of Stepanovka and Ilinka. And summarizing everything, this is approximately the line of combat contact by the end of the 1st of November. Obviously, the progress is significant. Now the Ukrainians are trying to find a solution how to stabilize the lines, how to slow down the Russians, at least on the line between the village of Berestki, Sontsovka, Zorya, Slavyanka, and then Andreevka. So this is the line of a final battle. This is the line that will determine everything in the future. If the Ukrainians are able to hold their lines, then most likely they will be able to hold this territory for a very long period of time. They will lose it anyway. The question is whether they are able to get some time to win additional months or not. First of all, most likely the Russians will continue moving along the railways from Voznesenka in the southern directions towards Berestki. So if the Russians are able to break through the lines along the railways, then everything will collapse automatically. Now let's move further and let's talk about the line between Selidova and the city of Pokrovsk. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours we got another batch of videos of the significant number of FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian vehicles that were moving along these local roads. This is very important video because the Russians most likely, after a very short operational pause, managed to bring additional reinforcements and reserves and resume their offensive operation in the northwestern direction. As for this direction, to understand the real situation on the ground, it's good to increase the numbers of update at least since the beginning of the week. And as you can see, just for the previous 5 days, we got the significant number of geolocations of FPV drone attacks along the railways. And we remember a new Russian pattern to move along the line of FPV drone attacks. All these geolocations confirm just one thing, that the Russians are going to move exactly in this direction and furthermore along the railways. So this is the primary target for the Russians, the village of Petrikovka, Grigorovka, and they're going to move in the direction of Pokrovsk. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Taretsk agglomeration and the city of Chasiv Yar. As for these territories, we got just one report from the village of Leonidovka. The Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that the Russians managed to secure the village completely. Geolocations that confirm Russian control over the settlement we got a long time ago, and based on those videos we adjusted the map, but just today, probably months after, the Russians confirmed this progress. As for the city itself, we stopped receiving any updates from the territory of the settlement. Most likely the Russians stopped their offensive operation in favor of the South Donetsk directions and the Pokrovsk directions. So now there is like position battles without any changes on the ground. The same story we can see in the city of Chasiv Yar, but as for this direction, the Russians understand the value of this direction because the city of Chasiv Yar is located on the hill, and if the Russians are able to take this hill under control, then they will be able to see everything around, like the city of Slaviansk, cities like Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, and of course Konstantinovka itself. So most likely during the next month or two, the Russians will resume their offensive operation in this direction. As for the Sivers direction, nothing special. It's still very difficult to understand what exactly is happening in this area because for example, the situation is as follows. We receive significant report about significant progress, let's say in Serebryanka, Vymka, and then for the next several weeks we don't have anything from this direction. And then once again we got significant report. So something strange is happening here. This territory is completely covered with the fog of war, but probably one thing we can say for sure that the Russians have strong positions there. Now let's talk about the southern Kupiansk direction, where the Russians continue advancing. The pro-Russian mappers reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the southern part of the village by the name of Tarskoye, and currently, according to pro-Russian sources, the armed forces of Russian Federation control around 50% of the settlement. The same advance, the same progress we can see in the northern part of the village by the name of Terny. According to geolocations that were published today by pro-Ukrainian sources, we have some changes on the ground. At least we have geolocations that confirm the Russian presence in this area. The Ukrainians published the video of several FPV drone attacks on the Russian units on the territory of these farms. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, currently the main activity and the main clashes are taking place in the village of Pershatravneva. The pro-Russian resources reported that the settlement of Pershatravneva in the Boguslav direction is moving into the gray zone. Units of the Russian armed force took control over of 12 strongholds and 36 buildings. Over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces counterattacked the positions of Russian forces 3 times, lost some vehicles and personnel. So currently there are very heavy clashes. Let's follow the situation. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, we have additional changes on the ground according to different mappers. So these are the changes during the previous 24 hours, and as you can see, the Russians managed to take under control positions in the forest along the river of Oskol, and a few days ago, we got reports that the Russians may try their luck and to cross the river of Oskol to take under control the village of Golubovka, and maybe other positions along the river of Oskol on the Ukrainian side. I think that this might be a part of an entire Kupiansk offensive operation to cross the river with the purpose to outflank the city of Kupiansk itself and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. As for the city itself, most of the pontoon bridges were destroyed. For example, in this video we can see how the Ukrainians were crossing the river using just the vehicles and some constructions that were built along the river itself. But autumn is coming, and most likely the redeployment of forces from one bank to another is going to be much more difficult. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kursk direction, where the Russians continue offensive operation. Once again, the elections of the president, the date when people will vote, is going to start on the 5th of November the next week. So most likely Russia will make a surprise for the United States of America and Ukraine, and they will introduce these 5 brigades of DPRK on the ground with the purpose to make a media picture and to probably give the Republicans another, let's say, good card to win the president elections. Most likely this is going to be something like this. So as for me, I expect the beginning of artillery preparation probably this Sunday, and on Monday we're going to see the very heavy clashes with additional progress on the ground. And that's it for today. Military Summary Channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.